Hi everybody, hope you're well. Happy Thursday and welcome to another lean-in session, our last before Easter. We're continuing obviously through Tuesday next week with another lean-in, but today we're very pleased to welcome two gentlemen with us from Kingspan Insulation. And we have with us Kingspan's Stuart Braine, who's the National Specification Manager, and also Craig Burr, who's the Sales Director for Australia and New Zealand, both representing Kingspan Insulation. Craig and Stuart are joining us really because what they're going to be talking about is, since we've moved to this distance working environment, these virtual events, what we have really found is a lot of questions arising from architects in relation to architectural supply trends, what's coming in from China, some of the issues that we've seen on a global scale. And so there's no one really better placed to answer these questions than Stuart and Craig. So they're going to explore the impacts of COVID-19 on the Australian and global architecture community and what it means for our future as architects. And so for us, it's just a good opportunity to hear from them. Can I just ask as well, if you're okay, if you can kindly mute, if you do join us on video, please make sure that your mute button is on, because otherwise we can hear every kettle whistling and every car going past, stuff like that. So just a little bit of background about the two gentlemen. Craig Burr he grew up here in Victoria in the Yarra Valley, and he's actually joining us now. He's based in Perth, but he started out a career in agriculture and then in veterinary health, of all things, and then joined the construction industry many years ago with a role with Aircell Insulation in Perth. And that was later acquired by Kingspan, who are an Irish-based organisation, as we know, and has worked in particular in that insulation division. And Craig's been there for now about 15 years. Craig's seen many downturns in the economic cycle. He's been through, as we all have, the recession with the mining boom, the GFC, and a couple of major company acquisitions as well. So he's got quite a lot to talk about on that front. And of course, Stuart joins us from the other side of the country, from Sydney, and is the National Specification Manager there, and has a very interesting background in chemistry world, but has a huge amount of experience in the architectural supply trend community as well. So what I'll do, there's no PowerPoint presentation today, so it's just a bit of a chat, and I'll curate any Q&As. Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, that you have your chat box available to you as well. Feel free to just jump into that chat box and type in any questions, and I'll moderate those as we go through. I'll act as the host, and we'll ask some Q&A to Stuart and to Craig. So if I can start off with you, Stuart, over to you for a bit of an introduction and give us your thoughts on what's happening in the architectural supply chain at this stage.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Michael, and hello, everyone. My name's Stuart. I'm just going to, like Michael said, we haven't got any slides, so it is really about asking questions, and if I haven't touched on anything in particular, just please shoot through. We've, like everyone, in the last month, has seen an enormous amount of change. Kingspan, being a global company, has had to struggle through lots of things, and that's what I'm going to really touch on right now, is where we've been since the start of March. So there's a few things happening, in particular for not just Kingspan but the industry, the insulation industry. As you know, there's some code change coming through in the start of May, with some thermal changes taking place. So we were really gearing up for a huge onslaught of knowledge and expertise from the architectural community, and we started to see that from January, and really in particular New South Wales really ramp up through February and even into March. And we had bookings for CPD presentations, every day, 2 or 3 times a day, through up until we had bookings right out into May. What happened was, when the virus hit, it was around mid-March or early, even a bit earlier, everything just stopped. When the government said we need to distance ourselves, and they started with organisations not exceeding 500, and they went through to more and more reductions. We had to, we almost stopped. So we from a specification team, we had to really quickly rethink how we deliver our products. We just don't deliver product, but we our product, our services, so our technical expertise, our CPT delivery, our the way we communicate with all of you had to change really, really quickly. And we chose a platform. We had to choose a platform, just going really high level now. So we had to choose a platform. We chose Cisco WebEx. It's the choice of platform that we use, but naturally we know that our team would have to adapt to all platforms like this as a Zoom session, Teams. So really it came down to what would normally take, weeks and even months for an IT department to test and trial and then get our teams up to speed and then roll that out across the country, even globally. Craig will touch on this, what's happening more globally, but even Australia-wide was really quite a challenge. And we acknowledge that it's not just Kingspan. We know that everyone here in this meeting here today would find similar challenges and difficulties and even successes. And on the back of all this also, we've got staff that have varying degrees of expertise in IT, and some guys adapted to it quite well and quickly and could do that. And then other people would, really struggle with this. And on top of that, then they said, oh, hey, you need to go home and work from home, and this is adding a different layer of complexity. And I'm sure you all agree. So I've got 3 kids and my wife works from home and my daughter's at uni, and then they said the school's closed. So then now I've got, a domestic router that's got a set capability for Wi-Fi connectivity, and my wife uses WebEx as well, and my kids are downloading, lessons, and my daughter's doing university, and we have to, even before this meeting right now, I made sure that no one else was on the Wi-Fi because I know it can be problematic. And I think this is just the world we have to live in going forward. I think that we're adapting to this, not just Australia, but globally, because it's becoming a norm, a new norm, and we're adapting. And the rate of adaptation is the key to it. And how successful you are will depend on how well you adapt over what speed and what period of time. So that's where we've come from, really, really high level. And the other thing we're doing on a daily basis, because we've actually globally, it's been quite challenging financially for the business, and so we've actually had and when you say challenging, it's financially challenging, but it's also become personally challenging for staff members. So we have a daily check-in on a management level. We also have a daily check-in on a team level, and it's checking in not just to see how you're tracking against the business and KPIs and so on. It's also a check-in to make sure you're personally okay, because we don't see each other face to face anymore. I used to fly to Melbourne every second week in Brisbane, and that doesn't happen anymore. You're not physically in touch with people as much. And that looking after people in this new environment is really half the battle. And if you get that right, I think it'll help facilitate business in this new world of COVID-19. Craig, do you want to touch on anything else there from a global?
Yeah, thanks, Stu. Look, firstly, a little bit about, I guess, from a business side, and continue on from what Stu was touching base on in regards to the people. So we obviously have lots of input globally as to what's happening with viruses, supply chains, etc. So I get a lot of exposure to how that all plays out around the globe. That obviously played a fairly big part into how quickly we started to move in shifting our staff off our sites, firstly, off our manufacturing and office spaces, where at the time we thought the office staff that could only do their job at an office. So we wanted to make sure that the people that didn't need to be there were off. So I think on about the 9th of March, we started to mobilise people and get them working from home, and that was okay for the first wave of it. And then the second wave was a little bit more challenging because we actually pushed ourselves from what we thought were functions that needed to be office based. Again, we pushed out a little bit further and found that outside of dispatching product and manufacturing product, we found a way essentially to get every other person off our site and to work remotely. So all our order entry people, all our customer service, all our tech support, everything is off-site. So if you're not physically putting a product onto a truck, or you're not physically manufacturing a product, you're actually not on a Kingspan site at the moment in Australia, New Zealand. So that were the big, quick changes that we had to our business, and part of that adaptation was to have the right tools, but also have the right people that were able to find ways around it. It's been really challenging for everybody, and as part of that challenge, it's been able to support the people physically with the tools and the ability to do it, but also mentally. So Stu, once we had a bit of a plan in place, senior management and middle management, we decided that we needed to actually find a way to make sure that the people were engaged constantly and daily, to make sure that they were capable and feeling like they're still doing their jobs on a daily basis. And so like you mentioned, we've gone from one excess to the other where we didn't use video. We use video conferencing once a month to do a review on our sales. And now we would do 4 a day. So I do 4 a day just internally, and then other things like this that would happen externally. So my start of day looks like I catch up with middle management, Stuart, and the other people that manage teams across Australia and New Zealand. And then post that, we'll have an executive catch up. And then when the opportunity arises, I'll poke into individual meetings with the departments as well. And that's just about, we're as people in a really changing environment, we need to be on the pulse as to what the challenges are and the concerns, but also, like Stuart said, it's been really confronting and destabilising for everybody, both internally and externally. So it's trying to have some comfort around that with the staff, that they've got a job, there is a future, as long as they can actually do their role, they're still valuable in the business, and as long as the government or the environment allows us to design, supply, and install products, we can continue to work in a format. It's totally different to what we were doing 3 weeks ago, but at this point, everyone's still adding some value to the business. So that were the key important things that we try to drive really, really quickly. And it's been really great to have a strong supportive team that's been able to do that as well. Because as human beings, you take away the numbers, and I'll chat on sort of supply chain and opportunity and where the challenges have been there. But the first thing is to get the people right and get them comfortable in the spaces that they've got, and then making sure that they can actually perform and they're not isolated. Because everybody's gone from either a big office or a large office or a big team environment where you've sat really close to each other, to some people are really isolated. They might not have people at home. Stu's got the opposite problem, Stuart. I think he's got too many people at home at the moment. So we're all working.
There's plenty of challenges, and it's a constant battle. I hear plenty of stories, not external, internal, where they are facing different challenges. Kids went on school holidays at different stages. Spouses and partners went on, started working from home sporadically at different stages, and and this is what like Craig was saying. This is the challenge. We also had, even to the point we had to, had a smorgasbord of ideas around how do we do this, and things like, you don't want to turn up and do a video conference in your pajamas. You don't want to have kids running around the background and the truck at the front. You want to choose a place in your home. Where are you planning to do this? Like I've got a backdrop behind me right now. We can now pull in technical guys who wouldn't sit in, a face-to-face meeting. So there actually are, like I said, a lot of things to consider, because there are positives too. People are much more accessible this way. From a resource point of view, we could resource technical expertise much easier now on a face-to-face video conferencing format than we could otherwise. I just find, we're trying to do this with our teams is naturally steer clear of all the challenge and the negativity, and we're trying to go, well, look, there are actually positives to this, and there are on the back of working differently going forward, we can capitalize on these and deliver our services, because that's what it's about, delivering our services. Our product still gets delivered by truck, and it's our services and our expertise and our advice and our thermal calculations and our condensation analysis and all the things that we deliver is done almost live now. We can share screens nationally, globally, and we've got to learn to use this, and that's part of the challenge, but it's also part of the positives that have come out of this new world we're living in.
Stuart, can you've raised some good points there. You talked about products delivered by truck, and this is a question for you as well, Craig. What have you seen in relation, if we talk about supply chain issues here? We've heard some horror stories come out from some architectural suppliers where you've got product being held in China or being held at the docks here in Melbourne or Sydney or wherever it might be. What have you heard in relation, or what evidence are you seeing at the moment in terms of supply chain of base metals or whatever it might be, bricks, whatever, that architects need in order to complete builds and maintain their contractual arrangements and agreements? What are you hearing on the grapevine, and direct evidence have you heard in relation to supply chain issues?
So if you want, Stu, I'll jump into this one. So it really does, like you touched on, Michael, it really does, depending on a structure where the product's actually pulled from. So things that are coming out of Italy and China have been problematic. We're probably not going to see some of that there might actually be a few more challenges coming up in the next couple of months for some of those heavily affected locations. The stuff in Central Europe around Spain and Italy, I think they're still manufacturing there, and they're still able to dispatch out of there. So my understanding from our own plants, we roughly have about 130 manufacturing sites globally, and all through those regions as well. So my understanding is unless there's an outbreak on site, a lot of those can still actually manufacture and get to transport and to dock and shipping. So that's still available, but there is still a couple, 2 or 3 weeks slow up. The things out of China from 2 or 3 months ago is still a little bit of an unknown, because they're traditionally anywhere between 8 to 10 or 12 weeks in sailing time from China to here. So if things weren't dispatched in February, we're not going to see that. We're going to start to see that in April, May, for things that weren't actually manufactured or dispatched. So it does depend on what component or content was based out of what location and what type of lockdown they were in at the time. So that's how we see it at the moment. There's definitely some financial constraints on some businesses in regards to dispatch. So if financially they've actually been impacted, then that's not necessarily that's part of the supply chain, but it's probably not manufacturing. It's probably sort of the chain to deliver to site and the route to site. So you might see some slight changes of ways that some manufacturers get to market if their distribution channels get affected. So if their distribution channels haven't been able to carry that through. Us personally, we seem really we're quite fortunate in our supply. We manufacture locally, and any raw materials that we bring in or out of Australia we don't seem to have had a huge amount of interruption to that. Part of that plays in the global market, and you've got some markets that don't need product. So if for instance, the China region wasn't manufacturing product, then the demand was light there, so they'd be able to send demand to other places. UK, Ireland seem to be in a bit of a real slow point at this particular time. So some raw materials that would normally have been in a starting to short up and getting a little bit of short supply will probably be available. So there is a real global buoyancy that's going on between where the supply and demand is, and at the moment, I guess it's locally, it's probably around robust distribution networks, probably locally is what it's really about, and that's probably what's going to be the biggest impact right now, is if people are shifting down to 3 days or have had to put people off and things like that, then probably not going to be able to deliver. And that might be a market reassessment as well. So you might look at other alternatives to get quick supply, or it might just be this is what the landscape looks like moving forward. There's a little bit more delay.
Stuart, you got anything else to add in relation to supply chain trends that you've seen at your end in Sydney? It might differ markedly from Perth, being different entry points to the country.
No, look, see, it's a really good question, Michael. Because we're myself and the specification team is heavily geared towards talking to architects and engineers, fire safety, ESD certifiers, these guys. The way we're structured, we deliver a project, we hand it over to a delivery team, and they're across the whole supply itself. We, like as Craig said, the robustness of the whole chain is really important, but nothing too much of a departure. We're largely looking at projects now going into the future, and that's really is our focus from a spec team. Albeit changed a little bit because of the nature of COVID-19, is we're looking at projects that are happening, I guess more front of mind and low-hanging fruit, so to speak. But from a supply to site point of view, we typically don't get involved in it too much unless there's a bit of a builder value engineering, as we all know how that works.
Yep. And I suppose we work very closely with the Australian Construction Industry Forum and do a lot of work with them. And the question keeps getting raised about construction and architecture being an essential service at this time. And we very much lobby that it is. I mean, the significant amount that it contributes to the GDP. Have you had any questions from clients at all in relation to the similar concerns, in relation to construction, architecture, design services being classified as essential?
Yeah, it is definitely something, Michael, that comes up regularly in discussion. We obviously in the construction industry, we're really happy and comfortable that people like yourselves and industries like yourself have been able to continue to push forward that this industry can manage itself well. We've had some really positive information from site this week, just about some of the larger construction companies, the lengths they're going to on site to make sure that they comply with social distancing and hygiene. And I think the industry, everyone's getting involved in this, and I think the industry is doing everything it can to make sure that it's a safe work environment and that it doesn't add a detrimental effect on the country's health. Some of the things that we've heard on site at the moment is we've heard large commercial construction sites have got line markers in, and every single floor has had a 4 square metre per line painted on it. So it gave guidance to all staff on site, all tradies on site, to try and get them in one space. We've got things that are happening where we're talking about staggered shifts now. So I think there was something passed about the construction industry allowed to work 24/7, and that's not to make people work harder. That's actually to allow less people on site at the same time. And those sorts of things are really positive. Continual hygiene of shared areas throughout the day, and checklists. So I think everyone's taking it seriously, and I think the industry is doing its best to try and fit in with the government's position on it, and I think that'll just continue as long as it doesn't have a negative effect on everyone, and they do, and they do the right thing. I think it's a really positive position that the industry is taking on this. It's really pleasing to see. Like I say, every week it feels like a month ago that Tuesday that I had the conversation about that, but things have moved so quickly in such a short period of time. But everyone's reacting really quickly to the change in it. So hopefully we find ourselves, and the social distancing, I guess, will continue, and how the market and the industry can adapt to that, it will be the most important part of it.
Thanks, Craig. I definitely think there are two things that have happened this week which have been of interest. One, we've seen the government really applaud the work of major construction, because when you drive through a city or any sort of major area, construction is probably one of the most visible things that's continuing. Even outside my house at the moment, we've got a whole bunch of people digging up gas lines, and they're all practicing appropriate social distancing. So that's still going on, and that's great. And I think the government has done well to commend the construction and the industry, the sort of wider profession at large, really, in terms of how they've approached that. And we have seen really good examples that have demonstrated the construction industry to social distancing, and long may that continue. The other thing of interest that we've seen in the last 24 hours is the Wuhan province in China has now relaxed restrictions. And indeed, we saw an aircraft land in Sydney this morning, or in the early hours of the morning, carrying medical equipment. And so we're now starting to see the trade restrictions coming out of central China relaxing significantly, and that'll only increase as we go forward. So do you see, you were talking about an 8 to 12 week period where stuff comes through, content and supply chain goods come through the ocean. Do you see now that maybe we were forecasting a bit too much doom and gloom, and that things might not be as bad as the media sometimes makes them out to be?
Yeah, from a supply chain point of view, I think it's going to be really very specific as to products that are directly manufactured in China and sent directly to here. So you've got some value. So lots of different components of construction, of manufacturing come out of China. So some raw material components start its life in China for some of our products, and then end up in the US to be manufactured into other things that get sent down to us. So there's enough buffer in some of our supply chain to not be affected by that, and I imagine a lot of large manufacturers will be the same. The thing probably that will be just be affected will be things that are manufactured in China and sent directly down to here. And whatever those are that are finished products that get sent in here, there will be an impact on that, but and there will be, like you say, that 8-week impact. So it's just really good to understand, I suppose, from a specification point of view or a supply point of view, where the products come from, so you can actually understand what risk or is potential, just in this climate, what supply chain risk might be in play. And then I said, like, it's local. There is a lot of doom and gloom media, I suppose, about it, but it's such a moving place at the moment. And like I mentioned before, because globally this seems to be moving at different paces, if China is actually coming back online and then another market in Europe is sort of changing, then you're sort of going to be fluctuating in what's available and what's not available. So it just depends on when things come from. But yeah, look, I think looking globally, and even as close as New Zealand, the way that we are operating in Australia right now is, it's a really positive. It's really positive. We seem to right now, and I don't want to overstep it, but right now we seem to find a way to move forward in certain spaces without having a full lockdown, without having huge issues that they are potentially about to sort of run into in Europe health-wise. We seem to have found a bit of a happy medium to move forward with. That some industries that can actually find a way to distance themselves on a site, or a residential or a commercial site, can continue to work. New Zealand was a really dramatic and a hard shutdown for our business over there as well. But at the same, there's more uncertainty in New Zealand now, halfway through their shutdown, than there is here with us in Australia. They don't know how they're going to come out of it at the other end, and what their constraints are going to be in place as they keep moving forward. So that's just a bit of an unknown. Whereas right now, everyone feels like we've got a bit of a platform. It's just a matter of how long this platform stays as it is right now. So I think there's some positives here, Michael, in that compared to the global position, it seems Australia is actually found a lot better position than a lot of other places have.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. And bearing in mind, we're only really 3 weeks in. So this is, for us, we're not really a month in terms of, I suppose for us, I look at it from a Victorian perspective, where we're headquartered here at the Architects, that the Grand Prix was sort of the first catalyst really to a significant shutdown when, you know, everybody flew into Melbourne for the Grand Prix and then it was cancelled that hour before it started. And so we are really only 3 weeks in, and in that time there's been a huge amount of change, you know, a huge amount of fluidity in terms of what the news is reporting and that sort of thing. So I suppose we have to struggle through as best we can. But I suppose the aim of these lean-in sessions is just to sort of have a cup of coffee and have a bit of a chat about it, and always think that there are positives to come out of it. One positive that, speaking to a couple of members earlier in the week, talking about substitution of product, obviously as a specifier of product, an architect goes in and specifies a particular very high quality product such as Kingspan insulation, or whether it be blue scope steel, and then at the end of the project, if they're lucky enough to, or unfortunate enough to sort of be denied access to the build, which sadly happens, you know, they come in and they find substituted products from different countries that have taken the place of the specified product. So in some ways, the feedback from our members has been that in fact some of the products that haven't been able to come through, you know, it means that the builds that are being done are being built with correctly specified products, which may cost more but are infinitely better quality. So there's always, I suppose, some blessing in that in some ways. I haven't really had any other questions. There was a question from Clinton Matthews online who talked about stop using the term social distancing and call it physical distancing. That's something that is a trend that we're seeing more and more. The University of New South Wales refused to use the term social distancing. They prefer the more accurate term of physical distancing. It is having an interesting effect on a psychological front of moving people into this area of almost mistrust, where you don't trust your family members who don't live in your own home, and it is causing some significant grief and stress and anxiety. And further to that, I just do want to say, we're obviously going into the Easter break now, but we're back online with another lean-in session next Tuesday, and that's going to be delivered by a psychologist, and that's going to be looking at how we deal with stress management and anxiety. So Stuart was talking earlier about a house full of people, his kids, his wife, everybody in one confined space, all using the internet, everyone at each other. What we are doing next Tuesday is looking at how we can help you as an institute get some tools to work through stress management, and how we look at the cortisol response and the adrenal response and all of those sort of things, and identify how to help help you along in your sort of daily roles working remotely. And then following next Tuesday, we also have a session on COVID-19 and managing wage costs as well. So next Tuesday is stress, or how to remove stress, and next Thursday is removing any issues related to workplace law. We're getting a huge amount of questions related to the complexities of standing people down, the complexities of making people redundant. And so what we will be doing is getting in a workplace relations lawyer, and that's already up online. So you can register as well. But if there are no other questions, I'll probably close it out there. So I thank you, Stuart, and thank you, Craig, for your time today. Hopefully that's been of benefit just for us to sort of have a chat about things. And we'll go from there, and have a great Easter, everybody, and we'll catch up with you next Tuesday at our next lead-in. So stay safe, stay at home, and we'll catch up with you after Easter.